I'm really excited to introduce Siân Griffiths to the community. She's an assistant professor of English at Weber State University and has just come, so we're happy to have her here tonight. Her work has appeared in Quarterly West, Ninth Letter, Cave Wall, River Teeth, Clackamas Literary Review, Salzier Poetry Review, Permafrost, the Georgia Review, among many others. Her story, What is Solid, was nominated for a Pushcart Prize, and Janet Burroway included her poem Fistful in the 3rd edition of Imaginative Writing. And her first novel, Borrowed Horses, is forthcoming from New Rivers Press. Please welcome Siân Griffiths.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here tonight and to be a part of this literary community and this community in the whole. Like, I moved to Utah last year. I've been here for just about just a little over a year now. And pretty much from the time I arrived, I felt right at home. It really is the most warm and welcoming place to move into. I went to graduate school at the University of Georgia, and the South prides itself on its neighborliness. It's got nothing on Utah. Just saying. So I wanted to read from the novel that's coming out next year. It's called Borrowed Horses, and I haven't read much from it at all. So you all will be the first ones to hear this chapter, and I'm just nervous as heck that I'm going to mess it up. So I'll try my best. But I'll give you a little bit of setup. I've pulled a chapter from sort of the late beginning of the end of the beginning of the book. My main character is named Joni Edson, and she's just returned to her home in Idaho, which is where I'm from, after trying to ride for the U.S. equestrian team in New Jersey, and she failed in that effort. Her horse is breaking down. And so she's come back home, and she's struggling with where she fits in to this community that she's grown up in all of her life, but now feels displaced from. I don't think I need to tell you anything more. There will be a few character names that she drops here and there, but just let those sort of wash over you. I don't think you need to know much about who those characters are. Eddie's battered blue Ford was already in the parking lot when I arrived. The rusty door of his mismatched stock trailer left open and swinging in the breeze. Odd, the open door. Carelessness wasn't like him. Latching it, I noticed fresh scratches marred the paint, the angry glare of silver. Eddie's voice drifted out the barn door. Sit back, back. The words were slow and decisive and commanding. He was giving a lesson. I stood a moment, eyes adjusting to the barn's darkness. A little leg, Eddie said. I don't have any leg left, Jenny giggled, plodding along on Zip. Come on, no rest for the wicked. How many times had Eddie said that line to me? Zip picked up the pace. He was moving better than he'd ever moved for Jenny, his hind legs stretched forward underneath him, almost tracking up. Jenny squeezed her leg again, and it all came together. His hind feet filled the hoof prints left by the front. Zip was moving like a dressage horse again. I heard my words again in my mind. I want the first lesson you've got. Yet here was Jenny. There it is, said Eddie. You feel that? Feel what? Jenny bounced lightly in the saddle. Zip's trot was smooth. She had to unlock her lower back to absorb the motion, but she couldn't do that until she released the tension in her legs. I feel like we're trotting 1,000,000 miles an hour. Is that what I'm supposed to feel? Fast, yes, but not quick. You're moving forward because he's engaged behind and pushing off like he should instead of giving you that little pony trot you were doing before. We've got nice long strides now. Jenny beamed, but the rest of the lesson went downhill quickly. Her hip remained rigid, and her lower leg flopped as she tired. Again, she began to tilt forward in the saddle, out of balance. That's enough for now, Eddie said. He watched Jenny circle for a moment, Zip on a long rein. Your homework is more of this, much more. Next week, I don't want you pooping out on me. I think I'll probably take your stirrups away. Take my stirrups? Jenny blanched. But Eddie only smiled. She took heart and asked, "When do I get to jump?" "Your leg is too loose right now and you're struggling with balance, but don't worry, we'll get there. You do your homework, it won't take long. Just keep working. There's no substitute for work." I smiled, thinking back to Dawn's response to the same advice. He hadn't let her canter either. "You want $30 for that?" she said, for trotting me in circles and telling me to keep my leg on. Eddie had only shrugged. He never argued his methods. You worked his program or you didn't train with him, that was all. He turned. "Well, hey there, stranger. Hey back." Hearing my voice, Foxfire, that's her horse, Foxfire, nickered from his stall, pressing the pink tip of his velvety nose between the bars, nostrils flaring to catch my scent. "We'd about given up on you coming back. It's good to see you. You learn anything new in Jersey?" "Learned I couldn't afford the board there and it pays to be rich." Eddie waved these words from the air. "No bitterness. That'll get you nowhere." I smiled weakly and fiddled with the strap of my helmet, its old sun-bleached velvet worn through at the edges. Just answering the question. Jack Stewart helped me with my hands a bit, though. Good, they needed helping. I didn't take offense. My hands had never been bad per se, but I tended to carry tension in my elbows and shoulders, stiffening at times, especially in shows. Decent hands, but not great. Eddie looked me over, appraising me as he might a horse, checking my conformation and fitness. The skin around his eyes was slightly more wrinkled in spite of the ever-present ball cap. He wore the same damn cap as when I left, a freebie that came with a grain purchase Lord knows how many years ago. The t-shirt, too, looked familiar, though who could tell one faded mariner's shirt from another? Perhaps it was the slight paunch that hung over his jeans, making all of his shirts look the same. Yet like me, he had a good build for a rider, long, straight legs, and a shorter waist than most men. Even aged and paunched, he was a force to be reckoned with, but he'd always preferred working with green horses to winning competitions. "You look good," he said. "You're keeping in shape." "Trying to." "Good. You're gonna need all you've got today." "Lazy?" Eddie barked a laugh. "No, if there's one thing she's not, it's lazy. The reverse, if anything. She's ex-track with a bit of mean streak." I looked him in the eye. "Define a bit." He looked away, and I remembered the gouges in the trailer door. "Maybe it's better if you just meet her," he said. "Great." I cast one look at Jenny, but she just brushed Zip, apparently too exhausted to listen to our conversation. "Where is she?" I asked Eddie. "Back pasture." I matched my stride to his as we walked. Rounding the barn, she came into view. The mare's coat was a dull, lackluster gray. To say she was thin was an understatement. Her ribs were pronounced as fence rails, her hips angular and jutting, no neck to speak of. Everywhere her unmuscled, unfattened skeleton was visible. She was a living anatomy lesson. Jesus. "Yeah." Eddie tugged at the graying hair that curled over his ear at the edge of his cap, a gesture I recognized from past moments of tension, jump-offs, injuries. "I ran across her one day just as we were packing to come home. Tiny paddock grazed down to dust. She lost weight being shipped, of course, but she was rough to begin with. More than rough. I think the previous owners tried to starve the spunk out of her." His hand stilled and he smiled. "Didn't work." My sympathy for the mare was short-lived. We hadn't gotten the pasture gate closed when she lunged at us with sudden fury, teeth snapping. "Whoa, easy girl," I said, ready to jump back out of the pasture. Eddie stopped and stood, and we watched her put on her show. With a whole pasture to run in, she wasn't running. She was stomping, rearing, tossing her head, and through it all, she was watching us and gauging our reaction. Eddie stood, the calm before her storm. He held out his hand sideways, 2 fingers raised, a signal for me to hang back. I needed no prompting. He never took his eyes off the mare, approaching slowly and cautiously, pausing frequently. The air was warm and dry around us. Only her antics broke the stillness. He stood at her shoulder for nearly a minute before slipping his arm around to catch her with the halter. They were testing each other, and I wondered how long it had taken to get this response, how many times a day Eddie had caught her in the pasture to show that no harm would come of it. "She's a mare, all right," I said. "An alpha mare." Eddie said the words softly, like he was wooing her. "Fantastic." He handed me the lead, and I walked her into the barn and cross-tied her quickly, eyes never leaving her mouth. As I brushed her, she swung her body alternatively away from me and suddenly toward me, trying to pin me against the wall. When I approached to pick her feet, she cow-kicked at my head. "Quit," I growled, drawing the single syllable long and low in my mouth. Her joints showed excellent flexibility. I'd give her that. Even starved, she was an athlete. Foxfire was growing ever more anxious at the end of the barn. Upset that I hadn't come for him, his welcoming nicker had changed into a more insistent whinny and was fast becoming a scream. The shuffle of his hooves filled the barn with noise and dust as he paced the front of his stall, increasingly frantic. I should have moved him. That was clear now. I would have if I'd realized how upset this would make him. How many times had I heard him? How many times had he hidden the lancing pain of a jump's landing just because I'd pointed him at a fence and asked him to go? If he'd stopped for a moment, I could clear my head. Everything was loud and swirling. The mare kicked again, barely missing. "Just go slow," Eddie said. The horse rammed her flanks against me, scrambling and tossing her head against the ties. The bolts shuddered in the wall as Foxy screamed on. Noise filled the barn, echoing from the rafters. I'd wasted my life, wasted it. How had I fallen from jumping Foxfire over 5-foot fences to this? A broken-down mare who wanted to kill me. There was no future offered here. The mare kicked again as I layered on saddle pads, stacking them to make up for her thinness. She shrunk from the saddle itself, first crouching low, unhorse-like, then springing sideways and slamming me into the wall, her bones crushing against mine through the too thin flesh. She was Eddie's project, not mine. Foxfire screamed and screamed, his rage pawing at his stall door. My betrayal, my infidelity, turned him into a crazed animal. He reared and struck the stall door, the metal bars singing with each hoof strike. The mare kicked again as I passed the girth under her belly. Her hoof clipped the side of my hand, leaving a circular indent that bruised instantly. Stifling a yelp, I shook my hand as if pain was a spider that could be shaken off. The barn was full with Foxy's screaming, crowding out any rational thought. He had to stop. If I was going to stay uninjured, I had to think my way around this mare. Eddie just nodded on. I gritted my teeth and tightened the girth, stepping out of the way of the hind hoof as it once again flew. Stop, goddammit! The larger accident had all come to this moment. Fate in the form of an angry gray bitch of a horse. Every muscle of me tensed. A surge of adrenaline that prompted no instinct to flee. I wanted to hurt something. Eddie held the bridle to me. An old-fashioned hunting-style headstall with broad, flat leather pieces long out of fashion in the show ring. He wasn't risking nicer leather, but he'd fitted it with a fat, loose-ring snaffle, an optimistically gentle bit for this horse. As I came to her side, she snapped at me 5 times in quick succession. The halter and the cross ties gave her no real range, but I would have to free her to bridle her. The bird bones of my hand throbbed where the iron shoe hit. I tried to think, tried to find a way to slip the headstall on. One moment of silence and I could bridle this mare, but Foxfire grew more panicked. My head was a ringing bell, every muscle rigid with his screaming, every bone vibrating like the metal bars he struck. Foxy, the rock, and this mare, the hard place, like Dave and Timothy, like Cheryl and Dr. Rivers, like all the things I was trapped between. Damn it all, this horse wasn't going to take me anywhere. With this behavior, she deserved to be jumped. I had no hope, not even the sliver of hope, of ever riding for Jack Stewart again. Yet I turned Timothy away, a bridle in one hand and nothing in the other. All the eggs in my basket broke under these iron-shod hooves. A standoff. The mare and I watched each other. The broad muscles of her shoulder and haunches quivered as she watched me. Fire burned in the core of her unblinking eye. Her ears were pinned so flat against her head she appeared not to have ears at all. The mare's flaring nostrils counted the seconds. Vigilant, vigilant, I gripped the halter firm in hand and unsnapped one side of the cross tie, but the mare was strong and she was quick. Her teeth locked like a vice around the denim of my jacket, clamping onto skin beneath in a vicious bite. I tore my bruised arm from her teeth, wheeled, and before reason could stop me, I punched her in the face. I'd hit her hard. My knuckles ached with violence, the bone of her skull as flat and unyielding as brick. I barely had time to register shock when she lunged at me, teeth stretched for anything to get a hold of. She was not a flight animal either, this one. I staggered back as rational thought returned. I had hit a horse. The only thing that kept her from me was the nylon halter that held her in check. I fought to make sense of what just happened, but Foxfire's screams were still ringing through the barn as he struck and struck at his door. Eddie laid a hand on my shoulder, stepping past me to snag the mare by the halter. He didn't say a word, but stood there, stroking her neck until she relaxed ever so slightly under his hands. It took a while. Her eyes stayed white at their rims, watching me. Eddie slipped on the headstall. I couldn't meet his eye. That will never happen again. My voice was rasping. Tears threatened, and I braced my jaw against him. This was no time for weakness, and tears never won sympathy here. Eddie didn't respond, but he didn't have to. Self-loathing welled. I sunk back against the wall, disgusted with my behavior. "Get up," he said, his voice firm but not unkind. He offered reins, a second chance. The ghost gray horse stamped, and Eddie pulled me to my feet. "Whatever happened in Jersey is over. This is Idaho, and you have a horse to train." I took the reins. Foxfire shuffled and called from his corner stall, eyes rolling, pausing now and then to rear up, arthritic hocks forgotten in his madness, and looked over the tall bars of his stall. I hand-walked the mare once around the arena's perimeter, introducing her to its mirrors and dark corners. She spooked at nothing. I hopped quickly into the saddle as the mare ran from under the weight of my body. I pulled the reins hard against her mouth to slow her canter, but she simply threw her neck back and ran, her head practically in my face, her gallop wild and hollow-backed. I worked the reins, pressure, release, but to no effect. I found the second stirrup with my dangling foot and pulled her sideways into a tight circle, her nose to my knee, until she slowed, dancing in all directions. "She's a little sensitive," Eddie said. "Track horse, track manners. Not so skittish as your run-of-the-mill track horse. She's not even listening to Foxy down there, which is more than I can say for her rider." I frowned. "Should we move him?" "Leave him. You need to get over this," Eddie said. After a moment's consideration, he added, "Next time we'll move him." Next time. I couldn't believe he'd ever want to put me on this horse again. I hadn't realized that Jenny was still there until I saw her from behind the fence rail, pale and watching. How much had she seen? The lesson was ugly, and I felt foolish. Zip was gone, and I tried to remember if she was putting him out to pasture when I snapped. Jenny smiled as we passed, and the mare kicked at her. How her image of me must have shifted. No longer the riding expert on the fine horse, but just Eddie's awkward student fighting for control. "Relax, relax," Eddie said. Jenny waved and left. "Where are those good hands I heard about?" My shoulders and elbows were marbled with tension, unyielding as rock. I breathed, trying to release them. It'd been easier to relax on Foxfire, who invited contact, who, if anything, leaned into it. The mare held her head high and back, evading any contact with the bit. Eddie drug out poles for her to trot, but she jumped them. There was a moment of relaxation before each leap, and she stretched and round and forward, but then she landed and tensed again. The moment was so fleeting it might have been imagined. It was a short lesson. She didn't have the stamina for anything more, despite her bravado. When I dismounted, she ran again from under my weight, breaking one of Eddie's reins and dancing at the end of the one that remained intact. An angry red stripe crossed my palm where the pebbled rubber of the rein chafed it. "Well, what do you think?" Eddie watched me with his ever-appraising eyes. "You don't want to know." "You could learn a lot from this horse." He stroked her under-muscled neck, and she allowed him to do so. "You've been spoiled by Foxfire, and you know it. You won't luck into another one like him." I looked at Eddie more closely, the battered cap, those quick, shaded eyes. "You're not trying to sell me this animal." "No, no," he laughed as he said it, hands opened wide to stop the thought as he would have stopped a runaway horse. "I'm suggesting that I could give you free lessons on her if you're willing to put in some time, say 3 days a week, training her. I'm going to winter her here at Thornfield. Connie and I have already talked. After what I'd done today," he had to be desperate. "Connie know about her manners?" "She's met her." He smiled again in that private way of his. "She wasn't thrilled, but she's agreed to let the mare have the back pasture. With winter coming, I need an indoor to get her in shape." "You'd be working with her too?" He nodded. "The other 3 days, lesson day, we work her together. You in the saddle, me down here. She needs consistency. We need to work as a team." "I don't know." Her head hung in the cross ties, finally showing her exhaustion. The flop of her ears was pitiful. I ran my eye over the perfect angle of her shoulder, pasterns, and knees. Her bones were impeccable, but bones alone don't make a horse. We'll have to go slow with her, of course, but I think she could show in spring. I laughed. You're insane, I said, but the promise of horse shows was tempting, and Eddie knew it. I took a step towards her to stroke her neck, and as Eddie had. Immediately she sprung, eyes white, legs shuffling, and teeth snapping. Give me some time to think about it. Call me this weekend and let me know. I watched her another moment. What other horses have you got right now? None, they're all leased out. I thought that was just for the summer. I extended them, everyone's getting along so well. In fact, I'm hoping Pam's going to buy Winston at the end of the month. Hansel's with Girl in Walla Walla, but he can't jump more than 3 feet anymore. He'd be no good for you even if he was available. I gestured toward the mare. It's not like she's jumping. Yeah, but that's only a matter of time. You need to learn how to handle a difficult horse. I walked up to her and ran my hand over the dull fur of her throat latch. Her eyes never left mine. She was quivering under my touch. So it's this horse or Foxfire? Unless you can borrow something else, and let's face it, Joni, Foxfire isn't an option anymore. You know your flat work. You need a jumper. And with the boys in soccer, I need someone who can give this horse some time. I picked up a dandy brush and flicked the dust and sweat from her coat. Does she have a name yet? Her registered name is Luckstar's Last Zephyr. Oh, God. Eddie snorted. I know. Someone got a little too creative. She's by Mesrour, out of Luckstar, and those are good lines for jumpers, but her owners must have been quarter horse people to come up with a name like that. Eddie picked up a soft brush and ran it over her face with a mother's care. I've been calling her Zeffie, he said. Zeffie. As if removing the R could remove her bite. I picked out her last hoof and set it down. No sooner had it touched the aisle than it sprang back as if the floor had been electrified, swinging out to catch me hard in the thigh. I fell against the wall, biting my lip to keep from reacting. Deserved, I thought. We were even now, a blow for a blow. We would start fresh if we started at all. Over the next week, the bruise would darken into a blue-purple hue, like something mimeographed, like something branded. Thank you.